All right, so episode number 6 here of the Sports Creative Showcase. I know for a fact I'm getting the show number right because every single time I've done this podcast, I say the wrong number, but this is for sure episode 6. And with me, I have a very, all my guests are special, but a very special guest in my friend Colin. He is a jack of all trades, content creator, videographer, photographer, graphic designer, everything under the sun. Colin, if you want to take a chance to introduce yourself to the people, what do you do? Give us a background as to who Colin is.
Sweet. Well, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Been a long-time fan. Watched this podcast for years and years. Anyways.
Years. It's been like 4 months of this.
It's good. So my name is Colin. I'm a do-it-all guy, right? One of those photographer, videographer, designers, all that kind of stuff. I want to clean up that title because it's way too complicated.
It is.
It's like talking to some
I
friends.
get that though because people are like, "What are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a videographer. I'm also kind of a photographer. I also did graphic. I don't know what I am." Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's like like family, like holidays. We're just coming out of Christmas season. Everybody's like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, I'm a filmmaker, but I don't really make films. I'm a videographer, and they're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm also a photographer." It's just, anyways, it's complicated.
So what do you call yourself?
So I call myself a videographer and content creator.
Okay.
Because
videographer first,
content creator second, because I do photography, like quite a bit of photography. It's like probably 40% of my work. I also do a lot of design work, primarily for like sports and social media content. A lot of my content kind of to date has, revolved around pace, and stealth is kind of like two words that I like to use, where it's like, I understand how to like show up to a pro game and not get in the way and still get out content really quickly. Like that's kind of always been my thing. More and more, I'm finding myself more interested in, lighting and audio and kind of like, upping the production value and the quality of the product that I'm able to provide. So not really sure what I am. But,
I like that kind of idea of like evolving and kind of being more than just one thing, but you're also like, and I think we're going to talk about this later. It's like, I think generally a videographer, like the nuance between filmmaker and videographer, like people can argue semantics and all and whatnot, but like I think you do a really good job of bridging the gap. Like when I think of a videographer, it's like quick bit content, which you're really good at, but you're also very good at like the other aspects of filmmaking, which is lighting a scene and telling a story. So like, trust me, I always get confused because like if you go through like my TikTok or Instagram, it's like I'm a sports videographer, I'm a content creator, I'm a filmmaker. I don't really know what I am, but like I think you're doing a really good job of like creating your own unique path and finding your own niche within this, despite it being like. And one of the questions we have asked is like, how do you like specialize? And you're doing a very good job of not really specializing in one thing and being good at many things, which is a hard skill to learn for sure. Well,
yeah. And I mean, even like, the more often that I'm on set, I'm realizing, somebody might be a gaff or a grip on set, for the one shoot that I'm with them, but they might be, an AC on another set, or they might be a DP or something else, right? So
the film world is expansive.
Well, and so I see that kind of same, the same similarities when it comes to content, right? Like on one shoot, I might be a photographer. The next shoot, I might be a videographer that's, a social media videographer versus a sports documentary videographer, right? There's like different types within that still. Cause, a lot of the work I do with Sportsnet is, it's not, in-game social media highlights.
It's documentary feature work,
documentary feature work, but it's also with like a 24-hour turnaround. Like, I'm sure we'll kind of get into some of this later. But
work with Donovan.
But like a lot of my work with Donovan, like it's filmed, filming a game, 7 p.m. game start for whatever it is. But they want to put this video on broadcast by
the next day.
The next day. So it's like, coming home, editing overnight. Which I should really hire an editor because it just gets way too exhausting. But so it's. I don't know. I do a lot of different things.
All right, and we're going to talk about those different things. Yeah. Obviously, you work in sports. You've done work with the CBL. You've done work with the CFL. You've done stuff for Sportsnet. You've shot a variety of different sports and different pieces of content over like what feels like very short term. Like you've only been doing this for 2 or 3 years, if I'm not correct. Like full time doing this for 2 or 3 years, right? So that in itself is really impressive because I know people who think freelance is like this journey where you have to do it for 5 years and then you'll actually get to it. But you've built yourself up, your brand and your work over the last 3 years. And we'll get to where you started, but can you just give us a glimpse as to what the last, 2 or 3 years pandemic or non-pandemic were for you in terms of like finding your way, like how has it been getting into this world of, 1 year you start shooting your university sports and then you find yourself a year later shooting a CFL game or an NHL game? Like how has that journey been for you so far? Because it's very expansive and you're a full-time freelancer, which I'm not. So yeah, I really just want to hear how that experience has been overall.
Totally. Do you want the whole story right now?
You know what? Yeah, let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
Tell me where you started. Tell me how you found your way into this creative world, whether it was with sports at first or whatever you were doing before. How did Colin find himself in this world?
Yeah, so, okay, we're going to take it right back to my first year of university, which was like 2014, 2015, I think. My roommate had a GoPro.
Okay.
And I was like, cool,
it always
that's
starts
fun.
with a GoPro. Everyone will GoPro.
You know what? I actually bought a GoPro. The GoPro was my first camera that I ever
Same
had.
with me.
I think I bought it in my second year because I kept seeing the stuff that he was making and I was like, oh, this is cool. He also like lived in BC, which like
he has a significantly cooler
life. It's kind of a cheat code because like I live in like Hamilton and I don't know if you've seen Hamilton compared to
Hamilton, the new BC.
Big mountain, but
it's not the same.
No, not at all. Yeah, so I bought a GoPro in my second year, loved it, and it was actually mostly for photography. So
okay.
I bought it, and I was like, I'm gonna do a whole bunch of different stuff with it. But I ended up just using this to like, it was a small little camera that I could put anywhere. I could control it with my phone, so I could take photos whenever, whatever. So if you were actually, I think I archived a lot of my old like Instagram posts because they were just weird. But what I would do is like, put the GoPro at the back of a mailbox and then take a photo of like me going to grab for the mail. And it was just like a really creative kind of like piece.
Casey
right?
Neistat style,
yeah,
like running gun guerrilla
but it was
content.
all photography. And so then
with a GoPro.
With a GoPro. And so then I was like, okay, like I need to buy something. So my next camera, I had this for like a month. Like I went to Henry's, bought the cheapest like Canon DSLR that I could find with a kit lens, and then like the 70 to 200.
Was it the T3i, like the Rebel series?
Yeah,
like,
it was the Rebel series.
Everyone
like,
gets a Rebel.
I think I spent like $300 on
and back
everything.
then the 300 was like, oh, this is so expensive, and now we're like, oh, that's not bad.
Oh man, yeah. But I bought that camera, used it for like a month, sold it on like Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji because I was just like, it's just not what I want. It's not doing it for me. So sold it, and I think I went for a while without a camera, and then ended up buying the Sony A6000 again. Okay, this is still in university. I think I bought the Sony.
This is like the pre-log.
This is like where I was kind of coming from. I bought the Sony A6000 because I had started shooting for. Man, I'm getting all these times messed up now.
It's fine.
I had my GoPro. And I remember like making little video pieces and then looking at what the athletic department at my school was putting out. And I was like, I can do something better than that. And I remember like I DM'd the Instagram account one time. I was just
I can do better than you.
I was like, well, like in a really nice way. I was like, I want to help. Like how can I, what can I do here? So Pete Reed, he was the sports information coordinator there. I like owe a lot of my stuff to him just because he gave me the opportunity. I walked into his office. I didn't have a camera aside from a GoPro at that point. I had no experience, and I was like, "Can I shoot a sports game?" And he was like, "Sure, as long as you stay out of the way." And I was like, "Cool. I don't have a camera. Like, do you happen to have a camera and a lens or whatever?" He's like, "Yeah." They had some weird like old Nikon something or other with a 70 to 100 2.8. So I was able to like start doing some sports photography. So he would let me borrow it. I shot like a whole bunch of games, like basically every game I possibly could. I was like, I come to all these games as a fan. Like I went to a really small school, so that's what we did, which was a ton of fun. So I was coming to every game and I was like, I'd rather sit down there, get a better view of everything, get to be around the team and all this stuff than sit in the stands. So I was like, I'll come to every single game and just shoot, and I'll just give you whatever I get. I did that for like a semester. A semester later, he was like, why don't we like pay you minimum wage to do this? Cause like, it's actually kind of helpful. That's how I got started, particularly in photography. It eventually turned into videography. I bought the Sony A6000, kind of just started growing, whatever. And that was kind of all throughout university, was just shooting for the varsity teams. And that was like giving me the practice. It was giving me some experience. It was like, really sparking a passion for like creating this kind of content, right? Like I don't know. I mean, you started doing that too, right? Like starting to shoot for your school is an interesting space because, you become friends with all these people, especially for me. Like, so I went to Redeemer University. It's like a small Christian university, like 1,000 students. So, we'd see these like basketball players on the court, but then they were also in the classroom with me of like, a class of like 45 people. So, it was a really cool way for me to document these people that were like in my life, kind of like all over the place. There's one guy, Foster Brown. I just want to give him a shout out. I think he started in first year when I picked up the camera. And so his entire basketball career in the OCAA was kind of at the same time that I was like learning my own practice. And it was actually kind of funny because I worked for the Guelph Nighthawks this past year.
And he played on
and he came to like a couple of the practices as like a practice roster player or whatever. And it was just this cool moment where I was like, oh, we went from, this like small OCAA kind of like stage to now we're, in the CEBL and we're like on a pro stage or semi-pro stage. So it was kind of cool to like have people that are along that journey with you. But
I mean, yeah, I very much like the same path I took when it came to like going through the Ryerson, like the TMU athletic side of things, like very much similar to you. I owe a lot to like our, not SID, but like our media head, Jim McClarty. Like really similar like story. I went to his office and I'm just like, hey, like, I'm a student in the sport media program and I really like what you guys are doing, but I want to help out. I want to like get involved. And like, it was literally like, he just gave you that. I think that's like one of the biggest things. And we're going to get to a lot of the questions that people have, but one of the questions was like, how do you get started? And I get asked that a lot. And I know you probably get asked that a lot. It's like the easiest way to get started. And you just exemplified it perfectly is like, just start in your own community, whether that's your high school, whether that's your university, whether that's your local rec league. Cause like, the opportunity is there. You just have to go and ask. And the worst that they're going to say is no. But if you're offering free help and you're offering just to be there and help them capture content, and at first, if it doesn't cost them a cent, like it makes sense for them to say yes. And then you get an open door and then everything snowballs after. And then you get the part-time job. Same with me. I started off as a volunteer, not really making any money and just shooting on my own camera and saying like, I just want to help provide content. And it went from not getting paid to getting a stipend second year to getting a part-time salary the next year, and it just snowballs. So I love the fact that like you're exemplifying that perfectly, which is something I always stress to my followers is like literally just go look in your backyard, the metaphorical backyard of where you are, and do that. And I also love the fact that like you're talking about these athletes and like documenting them. Like same with me, like even though I went to Ryerson, which is like over obviously a much bigger university, but like the athletes there, like they were in your classes, they were people you were saying, and like I grew up, like my skills grew with a lot of them kind of going through the motions. And for me, like last year, seeing the women's team win the national championship and getting to capture girls who I met who came into the school at the same time as me was like such a cool experience.
Totally,
so I fully relate to that part of your journey.
Yeah, like those are probably some of my favorite moments, right?
It's like a core memory. You just don't know it yet.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things too where like I've shot almost every pro team in the Toronto area.
Not a big deal.
I'm kidding. No, it's actually a huge deal.
Yeah.
Very great.
Colin is a huge deal.
No.
No.
I love what I do.
Good.
But the point is, some of my favorite moments are like, going to Georgian College for the OCAA men's volleyball championship in like 2013 or whatever it is. I have no idea actually what year it was, but whatever. But like the point is like, going for like a weekend and like, I'm with the team, like we're going to dinners, like, so I was never that athletic growing up. Like I played, soccer like every other Dutch kid in Southern Ontario, played soccer, loved it. Obviously, not that skilled. So I eventually stopped. I ended up actually going into music, which was kind of funny. So I just like dropped all my athletic ability. That's out the window. It's gone. And so, picking up a camera was the first time where I was like, I get to be a part of a team and I'm not that athletic, right?
Yeah.
But I still got that experience of like going on the road, getting to like, participate in like practices and team dinners and all this stuff. Like, when like the team won the bronze medal, like I felt like I had also
Same with
won.
me last
like,
year.
It's such a brilliant experience where you are just such a part of the experience and part of the team. It's just like, it's amazing. It's like one of the best moments I've ever had. Right?
And I think that like extends to like everyone who works in sports, like whether you're a social media person, the team photographer, or even like the, therapist or, like the trainer or whatever, like there's, even when you're not playing, like you're still part of that like family. And that's what I also love. And like for me, it was like, I was part of like a bunch of different families at Ryerson for my entire stay there. And like, that's what I loved was like seeing like, and experiencing that. Like last year, I just worked with the basketball team, and like when they won the national championship, when they won the OUA championship, it was like very much like you were part of that too, because you saw the journey. So like I think that's a really cool part of like working in college sports or like post secondary sports, because it's like you're much more an adult than you were in high school. And I think a lot of people in like the sports creative industry, like you just kind of realize like, oh shit, I can't play soccer at a high level anymore. Let me pick up a camera. You know what I mean? Like so I relate to a lot of parts of your journey, but let's keep it moving forward here. And you told me something before we started the pod that I didn't know about. You are full-time freelancing now in the sports world, but that wasn't what you were always doing before here. So what can you just kind of reiterate to me and to the audience what you were doing before you got into the sports work? And like, you know, as you were doing the video work at Redeemer, what was the other thing you were doing? Because this is a really, I'm a really big person when it comes to pivoting, because I wanted, from my story, I wanted to get into kinesiology, and I was taking the steps towards that, and then I really quickly pivoted into the sports thing. So what were you doing before this? Because this is really, I think, interesting.
It's a good pivot story. So yeah, while I was at Redeemer, I mentioned music. So I play a bunch of different instruments. That's always been a really big part of my life. And Redeemer being like a Christian school, I'm not going to get too into kind of like the religious kind of part of that, but I was very heavily involved with like a lot of the the worship services and all of this kind of stuff musically, right? Like, so I'm always on stage, like, behind a drum kit or behind a guitar or whatever. So after I graduated Redeemer, I actually started working full time at a church in Oakville.
Hey, that's my hometown. Shout out Oakville. Let's go.
And so, yeah, I was the worship director there. And so, every Wednesday night we were practicing with the band. I was like picking songs, picking keys, leading the team every week. I'm on stage, behind the mic and singing and leading.
How long ago was this?
That was 2 years ago.
So it's not that long ago, man.
We just had Christmas. There was the Christmas before that. I think
was
my
first COVID
was
Christmas?
my last. Wait.
Time changes really quickly with everything that's happened in the last 3 years.
My girlfriend and I, it's our 2-year anniversary today, actually.
Oh, congratulations! Hey, give the video a thumbs up for Colin and his girlfriend. Just give the video a thumbs up for that.
Which we'll get into some more of that. But what's funny is her and I started dating. Yeah, so it was 2 years ago, because her and I started dating as I left the church.
Okay.
I quit my job. Christmas Day was my last service, and then I quit my
so
job.
Ironic.
And I was like, I want to pick up a camera, right? And so I just jumped back into it. So ironically, and again, I don't want to get like too into the weeds with this. Cut this out if you need to. But when I was at the church, we're like leading services every week, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and nobody was allowed to gather anymore. And so we took like 1 week off from like having these like organized services, because we were like, we don't know what to do. Like, normally we have 400 or 500 people come into our building every Sunday morning, and I was building services for them to like come into church and, have, songs and liturgy and all this kind of stuff. And so the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden we're sitting there like, what do we do? And I was like, well, I've got a camera at home. Like, why don't I take that and we just start filming some stuff? So the first service that we had during the pandemic was actually like I think it was like a 2-shot interview that I ran with the pastor at the time. And we just, we created a service online. We put it up on YouTube, and that was what the church watched every week was, these services. So I was like, recording videos from home of like me playing guitar, uploading that, like, I'd get videos from everybody else and like all these other people in the congregation, and I'd put it together and we'd create a service and I'd upload it to YouTube. So I started doing video work while I was actually at the church as like the musical kind of worship director. And I think that kind of, it kept me using the camera, and so I never felt like I left like the videography world. But then,
and this is during the Redeemer. Like, this is kind of like these timelines are kind of intertwined.
Yeah, everything's kind of intertwined. And so so I had graduated Redeemer, worked for 2 years at the church, started doing some video work. The pandemic hit. I was like, what am I going to do? Ended up quitting the church after about a year in the pandemic. It was just like, it was a lot for me, and I was like, I don't think this is really what I want to keep doing. So I left and just started doing like sports photo and video stuff. I just threw myself into it.
But I think that shows that like you don't have to necessarily, like, if you're already doing video work or content work, because that was basically what you were doing for a completely different part of the industry. It's not outside of the picture to like transfer your skills from one to another. Totally. And I also just think that shows very much like how much the pandemic was like a huge pivot moment for a lot of people who like were probably in a place where they didn't really enjoy it or, didn't want to be long-term. So I love how you just, even though you left halfway through that, like, you still took it as a way to expand your skills and try something new.
And they're, and this is one of those things too, where like, if somebody wants to get into shooting sports, like photo or video, shoot everything else too, right?
Yeah.
Like, just getting your hands on a camera is so good. I'll flip this video to you. You can like throw it up if you want to. One of the most creative video pieces that I've done was when I was working for the church. It was like a Christmas service. I can play a couple different instruments. So I like sat down, put my camera on a tripod, recorded me like over here playing this instrument, over here playing this instrument, over here.
That's awesome.
And then like, in Premiere, I'm like, playing with all the opacity overlays and everything to like mask it all out so that there were 4 of me, I think, playing a song.
That's so dope.
And so like that was one of the most creative video pieces that I had done at that point. And it had nothing to do with sports, but I knew that sports was where I wanted to start going for. So when I left the job at the church, I ended up just throwing myself into, I was doing videos for landscaping companies, for, farms, for, I don't know, all these different like random brand interviews and all that kind of stuff. And it was like, those were the places where I was making money so that I could continue to shoot. Like I was shooting for McMaster University, doing a lot of their varsity stuff. And I was making like $14 an hour or something with them, like $15 an hour when I started.
With
it was
McMaster.
like, I was like minimum wage, just like whatever. And I was bringing like, I had 2 camera bodies. I had all the lenses. Like I brought so much equipment to, like I was getting underpaid like crazy. But for me, I was like, I'm getting my money doing all of this other kind of random stuff so that I can do what I love, which is the sports stuff. And I knew that if I kept doing the sports stuff, eventually that would be where the income is coming from, where I can then become a full-time freelancer.
And I think that's actually what a lot of people struggle with. And I think what we'll get to is you being full-time freelance. But like, I think a lot of people need, like, it's important to know that like, if you need to do something in the meantime to fund your life while you pursue your side hustle, that's totally fine. And I think everybody goes through that, like as a creative, whether you're full-time freelance, like people will still work a part-time job and do this thing on the side, whether you're a filmmaker, a YouTuber, a TikToker. Like if you need to find a way to fund your efforts to do what you really want to do, that's totally fine. Like, you know what I mean? I think other people, like if you aren't getting into this full-time right off the bat, that's fine. Honestly, the expectation for you should be, don't think you will.
No.
Like you still have to put food on the table. Like for me, like what I was doing before, like, I was in the sports industry, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do at the time. So I was enjoying it. I got to do what I wanted to do and got to work in a professional setting. But at the same time, like that was just funding kind of my gear set and my toolkit to then me taking this to working with the Argos, and the working with the Argos led to a bunch of opportunities, and those opportunities led to where I'm now with the NHL. So like I love that fact that you were able to, not only pivot one side, but then take your skills that you refined with the church, doing all those projects, and then kind of let it to fund the side hustle, which has now kind of become the main hustle with sports. I feel like I could draw like a brain map. I'll maybe animate like a brain map of like your journey. It'd be like pick up a camera, Redeemer, church, and then at the same time as church, McMaster, and like there's a bunch of timelines. Yeah. So let's keep going on with your story. You shoot for McMaster. I remember that's when you and I first connected. I think it would have been probably 2 years ago when we started. I think I was
still working for Mac last year.
Okay,
actually. So I only did 1 season with them.
Okay, so we've only known each other for like a year and a half.
Maybe not even.
It feels a lot.
I don't even know. I started with them, so it was last September that I started with them. Worked for them for 8 months, covered all of the, outdoor sports, indoor sports, everything. Then went through a summer. I don't even know. How did it all work? Shoot, I should have prepped before we.
It's okay. No, but like, so you got to work with McMaster on a content side of things.
Yeah.
Also a really good note for the listeners and viewers, you don't have to work at the university you go to.
Yep.
There are people, they're looking for people, and if they can't hire internally, they're going to hire externally. So,
well, and what's funny about it too is again, and this is like one of those things where you have to just put yourself out there.
Yes.
I did not go to Mac. I was not connected to Mac. I didn't know anybody there.
How did you get the job?
I went on the website. I think I just like was scrolling through like the staff directory, and I found the like content manager or whatever the title was, sports information coordinator, and it was actually now my good friend Mawad Issa, and so he was working there at the time. I think I sent a message on Instagram. I want to say I DM'd him, or I DM'd the Instagram account. I can't exactly remember what it was. Ended up jumping on a Zoom call with him, and I was just like, hey, like this is what I can do. Is there any room for me? I just want to help out. Like that's all I kind of said. And he was at the time, he was like, yeah, we're actually looking to hire somebody, like, we're going to pay you minimum wage or something like that. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I guess my goals aligned with his goals at the time. So he, took the risk and brought me in, and we ended up creating some amazing stuff. And yeah, it was a great time working for them that year.
So you worked with McMaster for those 8 months, like you mentioned. You met Muad, who eventually comes back in your journey very recently with Canada Basketball, and we'll get to that. But you go for McMaster, working minimum wage, and then I'm assuming this is where you eventually cross paths with the CBL.
Yeah.
You and I connect. You connect with Peter as well.
Over Instagram again. Again, this is one of those,
Yeah.
man, I will say, and I tell this to everybody, Instagram has changed my life because of the connection that it brings to you. Like, I'm not saying you got to be like, posting all your stuff all the time. I mean, I think you do if that's the way you want to go with it. Again, there's a lot to that. But I sent you a DM after, like, again, I was working for McMaster and I was like, I'm just trying to get better and better and better. So I'm like on YouTube searching, sports videography, photography tips, all this stuff. So I come across you, I come across Peter, find out that both of you guys are in Toronto. And I was like, sweet. So I think I just DM'd both of you.
I'm pretty sure I remember seeing...
local. Like, whatever. I don't even know. I wasn't asking for anything. I just wanted to be like, hi, like, your stuff is great. It's helpful. That's it. That's end of story. I'm just trying to connect some dots and whatever.
I think that's a really good point to make. Like, the people you connect with are so much more important than at times what you can do.
Totally.
Because, like, let's assume you never met Peter. And I think I'm talking specifically about Peter because you and him worked with the CBL and now the CFL, whereas you and I have worked together to a degree, but not as much as you guys have. For now, which hopefully we'll change that.
Keep it going.
But I think, like, if you never messaged Peter, the odds are you probably would have never gotten started with the CBL. I mean, I'm sure you would have found your way there without, but having that initial contact and reference and just reaching out and putting yourself out there, like, was an incredible help for you. And so obviously Peter, who, if you haven't watched, we do have an episode down. I'll link it down in the description below with Peter. He was running video things at the CBL. And at the time you were with McMaster, you were in touch with him. How did you guys connect and then lead you to working with the CBL and then specifically the Guelph Nighthawks?
Yeah. So again, I had sent him a DM. I was like, hey, love your stuff. Like, if you ever need any help, I'm local. I can be your second shooter. I think he responded with, like, within like 4 weeks, I was shooting a CEBL game with him just as his, like, second shooter. And I think that's where, you were doing the same kind of stuff that season.
I would have met you in person that way. Yeah.
That's when we... so that was right after the pandemic, I think.
It was during the pandemic.
I
remember because I would go and get swabbed before games.
I gotta
get swabbed wearing masks. I remember
we
that.
were shoving those things. Man, I gotta stop.
My biggest fear was going to one of because that's the only place I could get a test. So my biggest fear was, like, I would end up in, like, Niagara. Of all places, get a swab on my nose, sitting there for 15 minutes, and then be told you have COVID. Well, I just drove to Niagara for nothing. Like, I do think it was during the pandemic. I remember definitely. Those fears vividly.
Definitely, yeah. So I was shooting some games with him. Again, it's just one of those things where you start to connect the dots, and they will continue to connect, right? So I started shooting just the random game with, like, I think I shot 6 or 7 games with him that season, just producing in-game video content, send over all of my raw footage. End of story. Really simple. Probably 4 months later, the Guelph Nighthawks, which were a team in the CEBL. R.I.P. Man, I loved that job. So sad. It's fine.
If you guys aren't familiar with the CBL or the Guelph Nighthawks or anything we're talking about right now, the CBL is the Canadian Elite Basketball League, domestic pro league here in Canada. I would kind of put it akin to the G League.
Yeah,
I would say the basketball is pretty comparable to the G League.
It's good. I mean,
you've obviously watched it way more than I have.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they're professional athletes, right? The league is growing. I'm curious to see where it's going to go in the next 5, 10, 20 years. We can leave it at that. This isn't about the CBL, but anyways, so one of the teams, the Guelph Nighthawks, which was fairly local, they were hiring a graphic designer, and I remember Peter sent me the listing. He was like, "You should apply for this," and I was like, "Well." Like, I'm not a graphic designer. I've opened Photoshop before. Like, I kind of know my way around it, but I'm not a graphic designer.
Relatable.
Ended up applying. And I think with Peter, the marketing director for the league, Anj, I think he probably helped me out as well. Ended up, like, driving all the way to Guelph. I'm sitting down with the president and the marketing director of the team. And I'm like, yeah, so I can do some, graphic design. It looks, it's passable, whatever.
It's okay.
When it comes to print, I got no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to set up bleed marks and trims and all of this kind of stuff. But I was like, I still don't know either. I have to watch YouTube videos every time. But I was like, I'll figure it out. I only learned
about slices.
Yeah.
Those seamless posts on Instagram?
Oh, yeah.
I just learned how to do that this year.
Oh, man.
And I've been doing graphic design for like 4 years now.
Life-changing tool. Those are great. But yeah, ended up going through the application process, but I literally was just like, listen, like, I don't know a lot about graphic design, but I'm willing to learn and I love to learn. Also, I can do all of this photography and all of this videography, and I understand like a little bit of marketing and social media management. So, I had created like a pretty big toolkit that I was bringing to a job that was pretty specific. They ended up hiring me because I can do all of these different things, right? Which then gave me the access to a pro team and the platform to begin practicing, right? Like I think, so that was probably a year ago. Actually, yeah, it was January 1st last year. I started with the Nighthawks. So this is 1 year ago. I started working full time for the Guelph Nighthawks. Wasn't making a ton of money, so I was working my butt off because I was, working full time for this team, but while also taking on so many other projects, which was really, really good for, again, just practicing and continuing to like push yourself and your creative limits. But yeah, so I was working full time for a pro sports team a year ago.
To give you guys a really a timeline to follow so far, Colin starts off with Redeemer 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
So it was like, 5
years ago, and then works with his local church during the pandemic. Church eventually doesn't work out, but does content for them. Goes to McMaster. Through McMaster, finds me and Peter, connects with Peter, goes to the CBL, shoot some games, and then a year ago starts working with the Nighthawks. And one thing I wanted to touch on when I was prepping for this interview with you was you obviously went in as a designer role, but you all, as a collective, had all these different skills. And I think it's really cool because, again, I really relate to your story because I started off as a videographer. And then when I went to TSN, it's like they're looking for a graphic designer. I've never done it before. I spent a whole year practicing and I said this story before. I was sitting in the backyard and I realized, like, if I want to be successful in this industry, you need to learn everything because you need to be so indisposable and like so good that people can't get rid of you. And I think by learning a lot of skills, my whole mentality these days and even now is be so good they can't get rid of you. So with that being said, you obviously come into this role with limited graphic design skills, but you come in with a lot of additional skills.
And the willingness to learn,
which is a really important part. And I've said it before, and I have a lot of everyone on the podcast. I've said, like, everyone's said to, like, as a part thing they've learned is like always be willing to learn. And like that's something I don't see a lot of people do. Is like they think like, oh, I've made it to the NFL or whatever. I don't have to learn anything else. But I think the willingness to learn speaks a lot about your character too, which is also really important. But we'll get to that. So you get to the Nighthawks. You're taken into this role where you're supposed to be a graphic designer, but you're also doing a bunch of different stuff. What was that year like? Because I remember talking to you halfway through the year, and I'm like, "How are you doing?" And you're like, "Oh man, like I'm." And I think that's common when you're starting off and you're taking all these things. But like, what was that experience like? What did you learn in that first year creating content? You were doing photo, you were doing video. I swear to God, I've never seen someone pump out so much content and so much variety of content over like a 365-day period like you did.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I mean, working for the Guelph Nighthawks, they are a team that's owned by the league. So technically, I was working for the league, which means I also shot all the other local games that season. Like I can't think of exactly the number of games, but I think within like 16 weeks I had shot like something like 35 basketball games. And it was just like, and all of my other freelance projects on top of that to, continue to make money and whatever. But
the grind never stops.
The grind never stops, which it is stopping now. That's, if we're
kind of nice.
If we're going to talk about goals for the next year, it's interesting to kind of look back at the, how the last year has been.
Everything was.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things too, right? Where access is so important to what you can create. Unfortunately, so McMaster University, their gym is so terrible. Every light,
I've shot there. I know.
Every light is a different color temperature, and it's it's flickering. It's the worst to shoot in. So no matter doesn't matter what camera you bring into that building, it doesn't matter what's happening. Your footage is always going to look kind of
relatively ass.
Fine.
Yeah. Relatively.
And so I think the best part that I got out of working for the Guelph Nighthawks was the access to a pro team in a pro facility where I got to create stuff where, it looked good, right? Like this is the unfortunate side of things is like shooting Timbit soccer versus like pro basketball players. Your footage just looks so much different because the subject you're shooting is so much more interesting.
So Peter, when I had him on this show, said the same thing. And I think it's really interesting to keep that in mind because it's like you can shoot high school basketball and that's fine. You can make that look really cool. But the fact of the matter is when you get to a new level and these players are just more athletic and do better things, your footage is automatically going to look better. I could go shoot Ryerson Athletics hockey and it's great hockey. It's really good high level hockey. But then you go to the NHL And it's not the
It's a different world.
It's a different world, but it's not really like the NHL. It's just the athletes are better.
Yep.
Ergo, what you're capturing is going to be way cooler. So
Yep.
I actually love the fact that
well,
you
and
noticed
that's
that.
and that's the thing too, is like, you know, with the skills that I have shooting, you know, video for basketball, let's just like hypothetically,
Yeah.
the stuff that I got shooting for the senior men's national team for Canada basketball this year looks dynamite, because it's like, you know,
The best players in the world.
the best players in the world are in front of my camera, so it doesn't matter what I do, it's gonna look good because they look good. They're all good-looking guys. But
Handsome, tall
I can
boys.
do the exact same thing shooting for the senior men's national team as I would shooting for like a grade 9 basketball team. The exact same thing, right? I'm in the same place. I'm in the same, you know,
could even
same
put those
settings,
kids
whatever.
in like Scotiabank Arena.
But see, that's the thing though, is like that's where it gets different, because where you are totally matters. And so I have this. So I'm doing a lot more behind the scenes content for, you know, some local production companies. Something that I really like is, you know, when we walk into a space and it's like, okay, if we're going to shoot here, what are we putting in the shot, right? You get to build something out of scratch. And so I'm realizing the importance of, you know, set deck, lighting, all of this kind of stuff, because all of that adds to the production quality of your video. And that's something that like I'm trying to take to my own like personal, you know, my YouTube videos and stuff, right? Like I spend, you know, hours lighting the shot before I hit record and start talking to the camera. And that's the thing, is like, unfortunately, shooting pro sports is better because it's in a better environment, right? Like Scotiabank Arena, the first time I walked in there, I was like, oh, I don't have to like crank my ISO to 12,800 to, you know, expose my shot correctly, because I was so used to shooting in like, you know, high school gyms or university gyms that were not that good.
Really nice lighting. Yeah.
Exactly. So it just looks better. You've got bigger, stronger athletes that know what they're doing, right? The first CFL game I ever shot, I remember like, you know, this is practice. Like I walk out into the field and I'm like, holy smokes, like, you know, I'm in this outdoor venue. The first time I've ever shot at Tim Hortons Field.
It's a great venue.
It's a sweet venue. I mean, it's like, it's small. It's, you know, it's a Canadian football venue. It's not huge, but it's really dope. Like for me, I was coming from, you know, shooting soccer games or outdoor games that were like basically in a field with some trees behind, to going to Tim Hortons Field where it's like stands that are full of people, and the lighting and everything about it looks so big, right?
That makes you realize though there really is levels to this stuff.
Totally.
And I think a lot of people take that for granted. Well, not take it for, in a way, people in the higher levels take it for granted, but I think that's a lot of things a lot of people don't really realize as they're coming up. It's like, as you level up in this career path of being a sports creative, whether you're a photographer, videographer, whatever you do, you start to realize as you move through these rings that like there is a big difference from level to level. It's not just the athletes, it's the environment you're shooting in, it's the situation you're shooting, it's the gravity of the games. Like,
and that's why I think access to teams is the most important like tool in your toolkit for when it comes to shooting sports. And a lot of the times the access is going to come from who you know.
Exactly.
Right?
It's not what you do, it's who you know.
Totally. And so I see creatives, and I don't want to like, you know, harp on anybody or shit on anybody, because everybody's grinding and that's what's important. But there are people that have access to pro games that I'm like, your stuff's fine. Like, you know, you're fine at what you do. And it's infuriating because I'm like, I see so many people that are like grinding so hard. They're working their ass off. They're making some like really awesome stuff for like, you know, university sports. I'm like, man, if you had the platform to do something for like a pro team in a big, you know, venue and whatever, like it would look so good. But then it's like kind of frustrating when I see people that are in those pro
I know exactly
spaces,
what you're talking
and I'm just
about.
like, but really, like that's all you're gonna do? Like, I don't know. And that's something that like I've always walked into
but you're
every
thinking
project.
bigger. And not a lot of people, I think a lot of people in the creative industry have this tunnel vision. But you're, instead of the tunnel vision, you have this open vision. Like, you know what I mean? So I think that's a really unique skill set that you have, and that I notice in a lot of people. It's like when you walk into a venue, when I walked into Fenway Park last weekend for the Winter Classic, I'm like, first of all, like, again, there are levels to this shit. But when I got there, it's like, okay, there are like 5 other people shooting this game. How can I make it look different? How can I do the best possible job in this situation and not have footage that looks like the other 5 shooters here? And I think that's what you do really well. And I think that's what you're talking about. It's just like, when you're in these scenarios, when you're in like, you need to see how you can take advantage of the scenario. Not a lot of people do that really well. Again, we're not trying to harp on everyone, but I know exactly.
No, for sure.
I agree with what you're saying. We're talking about honing your skill set here. We're talking about, obviously, you got the access in 21 and 22. Now that you're there, it's kind of like when you make it to you're a hockey player, you make it to the NHL. Your rookie year and your sophomore year, you're getting the lay of the land. You're starting to learn the game. your third year and beyond as an athlete and as a content creator in this case, you're trying to hone your skills and become a better creator altogether. You're trying to take the opportunity that's given to you and expand on it. So you put this on your story. Can we talk a little bit more about what you were talking about in that case?
Yeah. And I mean, yeah. So I think exactly how I said it was like shaky footage, film overlays, and celebrities aren't going to make the cut. And what I think what I mean about that is like, you know, so this past year, J. Cole, famous rapper, probably the most famous rapper of our time.
Here or there, you know,
J. Cole was signed to a team in the CEBL, the Scarborough Shooting Stars, and his first game was an away game, which was in Guelph, so the Guelph Niagara, so where I was working. So, which was just a crazy experience, man. It was hilarious. So J. Cole shows up. There are like, you know, I think we gave out like 40 media credentials for this game. Like everybody and their aunt had a camera there. They were all trying to like capture content of J. Cole. And it was really cool to kind of see. I mean, you know, on one hand, there's so many eyes on the CEBL, so that's great. On the other hand, I'm like, there's some phenomenal basketball going on right here. There are some incredible stories in this game that nobody cares about because we're so focused on J. Cole. And for me, I was like, it just didn't sit well with me because I was like, the way you kind of said this was just because you can take a photo of a famous person doesn't mean it's a good photo, right? Like J. Cole, like, sorry if I'm outing you right now, but like, you're not that good at basketball, right? And like, why would I show up to a basketball game and shoot, you know, the worst player on the team? Like, it's not where I want to be, right? Like, I want to be telling this, I want to be telling quality stories and creating content that looks good. That's like real. It's authentic. It's like, it's meaningful. And so I think like, you know, one of my goals for this year is just to be not just upgrading the production value of what I can, you know, produce or create, but it's also like, you know, honing my craft to a point where I become very good at something. And this is something, there's another podcast that I follow, a couple dudes from the States. They're all like, you know, photographers, videographers, kind of in the sports and event kind of world. And something that they kind of were talking about, I should really mention them. What's their
505?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I love the 505 boys. I've talked to B Figgy. I'm trying to get Braden on this podcast. So Braden,
cool.
If you're listening to this, Braden, you're on here soon. But no, the 505 boy.
Yeah, so 505. I don't, you know, I'm not going to say I keep up with everything just because there's a lot of good content out there, but something that they posted recently was about, you know, focusing your skills, right? And so I think something that like, just for myself, you know, how can I future-proof this plan? You know, in 5 years or in 10 years, 15 years, what am I going to be doing that's going to be continuing this work while I still make enough money that I'm, you know, supporting a family. I've got enough time that I can actually do things with my life, you know? And so, you know, for me, this year is all about personal growth, personal creative growth. It's about like really pushing what I can do. And it doesn't matter who's in front of the camera, right? Ultimately, yeah, if you can create like a really good piece around like, you know, one of your, you know, college basketball players, and that's going to be really good. But if I create the same piece for like Scotty Barnes, like obviously it's going to have a different weight to it because of who they are. But I want to approach every single project as if it's like the most meaningful and impactful project that the entire world is going to see.
But I think that's important. There's something important to realize there. It's just like, just because you're this hypothetical story video, this feature, let's say you're doing a feature piece on Scotty Barnes versus some person who's not really known but has a cool story.
Yep.
Even though it doesn't have the same metaphorical weight of a Scotty Barnes, you know, rookie of the year, Raptors star, it still might mean a lot to A, the person you're making it on, and B, the community behind that people. And versus like the Scotty Barnes thing is really cool at a visual. It's going to be visually cool. It's going to sound cool. But I think that comes to the whole like social media problem that we have on terms of content creation. It's like, how do you make something that lasts the test of time?
Yeah.
Because I'll say this right now, and I'm, you know, to everyone got really cool stuff at J. Cole. It was cool. I will say, like, I agree with you where it's like, I was watching that game, and as someone who shot the CEBL last year, the year before that, it was so cool to see the league finally getting attention because those are some really good basketball players, those are some really talented, great personalities, great athletes. And it's really cool to see that stage, seeing Drake talk about it, all that, super cool because it was a big thing for the league. It definitely helped them grow their brand without a doubt. But on the other hand, you're only really seeing things with J. Cole. But now when we're talking about it almost a year later, everyone kind of forgot J. Cole was there.
Yep.
And therefore, and I'm not saying everyone's photos, and I know some really talented friends of mine who were there shooting really cool stuff of J. Cole, but like when you think of the longevity of that, like it had a shelf life. He's not playing basketball anymore. He's doing music again. It was a very one-time thing. So it's a really cool thing you bring up, and I think it's a really effective way of saying it's like, you know, that had a shelf life, and it's gone. It's not happening again. He's done. He tried it, whatever. It was cool in the moment. But your thing is like, how could I make content that people are going to be talking about for years to come? And I love that because it kind of, social media, unfortunately, these days, and I'm just going to speak candidly about this. I'm not calling anyone out. This has nothing to do with the J. Cole thing. Like, I think a lot of people on social media these days, it's a lot of clout chasing. And I'm just going to say how it is. It is a lot. And it's cool when you get to shoot an athlete. It's cool when you get to shoot high profile players. I'd be a hypocrite to say that. I shot the Winter Classic last week. I got to shoot Sidney Crosby. Like,
the reveal.
Yeah, dude,
great shot.
I'll like there again levels to this thing. It is so cool to shoot those athletes and so cool to be in there. But to the same degree, it's like, I don't want to do it for cloud chasing. I'm doing it for my job. I'm doing it to make a living. I'm doing it to like tell the story of what happened in that game. But I feel like unfortunately social media has come to this place where like you get a photo of anybody famous and that's all anyone cares about now. And no one really, and that's the problem I think that we find in social media. It's like it's quality content versus content that catches your eye right away, but you might forget about it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's that instant gratification, right?
Yes.
Like, you know, you post a photo of a recognizable face and it's going to blow up. So I shot one Leafs game, which honestly was like dream gig. Thank you, Donovan, for having me out for that.
Me to that. I have yet to shoot a Leafs game.
Man.
Never done it. You beat me to that.
I won't tell the whole story right now. But so I shot this Leafs game. I was doing like a video feature with Donovan Bennett from Sportsnet. Cool piece. Wish they won. It would have been cooler, but they lost. So it's only cool. I was doing all this video stuff, but right before the game, I ran down and I snapped like a whole bunch of photos just as fast as I could. I was like, I've been to like 3 Leafs games in my life. Like honestly, Toronto sports, you're so expensive. I can't go to anything. Like it's ridiculous. So for me as like, you know, this like small town Southern Ontario kid growing up, like watching all the Leafs games because they were on, you know, Hockey Night in Canada. Like that's what I was doing, right? So anyways, I come to this game. It's like the biggest shoot of my life. I'm pumped about it. I run down, I snap a whole bunch of photos in like 3 minutes of like warm-ups, right? It's just the guys skating around. I post those on my Instagram because they're recognizable faces, right? Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, like these guys that are like everybody knows who they are. I'm going to post them because
it's cool.
It's cool, right? It's the clout that I'm chasing. And I did it and I was aware of it. And I was like, these are not my best photos I've ever taken by a long shot.
But it's who's in the photo.
And it's what it means to me, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where like, don't chase the clout, but if you're loving the chase, do it. Like by all means go enjoy it, but also create stuff that's like so good that you are going to get hired to continue to create stuff. Because at the end of the day, those photos of like, you know, Austin Matthews, and I think I've got a shot of Nylander coming down the tunnel. And that was like, again, it was one of those moments for me where it's like, I got to take that photo. That's incredible. That's going to be a core memory that I have for the rest of my life. But that photo is garbage. It's never going to get, like, I'm not going to get hired.
It's good that you're able to, like, look back on it after and get over it and, get over the hype of it and understand, like, you know what, this photo's shit.
Yep.
But I think you just said it really well, and this is kind of my thing. And I once got accused of cloud chasing, and I'm like, you know what, I totally get why you think that, because I post my work. But, like...
I do cool shit for work.
But, like, that's the thing, and that's my whole, like, you know, I love sharing what I do because I love... what I do, and I'm so passionate about it, and I posted all my stuff when I was working for Ryerson.
Yep.
There's no difference from what I was posting then versus what I'm posting now.
Totally.
It's just that the brighter lights, the bigger stage, the bigger names.
Yep.
So I love the fact that you said that. It's like I'm sharing it, even though it might not be my best work, but it's because I love what I do. Do you know what I mean? Versus like I'm posting this photo. I could post a photo of Sidney Crosby tomorrow. And I posted that one video because of what it is. But I'm not posting it for the likes. I'm posting it because I got to have this really cool experience. My brand is to show people that you can start at X and get to Y and be at these really cool experiences. And so it's like I think you kind of have to have the intent,
Totally.
and and be truthful to yourself as to why you're doing this, because we know a lot of people who, again, I'm not calling anyone out specifically, but we just you know people who will just take a photo of XYZ person, post it, and the reason they're posting is because they know it's going to rack up numbers.
Yep. And again, do it if you love it.
Yep.
Do it if you love it, but also set a standard for yourself, right? Like, this is something I've got a video drafted up in my Instagram reels. It was a Scarborough Shooting Stars game. I don't even know. Guy goes up for a ball, whatever. It doesn't matter. The video is like the highlight, and then I finish on Drake, who's courtside, like
That's
standing
so
up.
cool.
He's like,
That's so
he's
cool.
getting all like into it. And I'm like, this is dope because it's Drake, but it's a shit video. So I've never posted it because I'm like, I don't even want to be
You have a standard for yourself, and that's good. You're not just succumbing to this is Drake post.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? A lot of the photographers I know who shoot Drake, like, they're really, really good photographers. But I have a friend, my buddy Kyle, he shoots some fashion. And we had this whole conversation one day of like, it really is unfortunate that social media has become all about who is in the photo, not how the photo was taken or who took the photo.
Totally.
But I love the fact that you've kind of set that standard for yourself. And like, it's so cool because it's Drake. But I also know it's a shit video. There really is a balance there. I have a ton of those Stanley Cup photos.
Yeah.
A lot of them are bad. That's not even a good photo. Like, that's okay. But it's a photo that I will always remember taking.
Totally.
So there's it's a fine line of balance you have to walk in
Totally.
this case.
I went to the NFL draft again with Donovan, which was a wild experience, being somebody that's in Canadian sports to like take one step into American sports, shooting the NFL draft. Crazy. We showed up, we had no access. Like, all of a sudden we're like,
no one knows who Sportsnet is.
No, yeah. Sorry, Sportsnet, but nobody cares outside of Canada, which is like kind of frustrating, but whatever. So we showed up, had the wrong access. No, like, all of the photographers, there were like hundreds of photographers there. Nobody got the right access. Like, we were all basically having the same access as all the fans, which meant we had to like arm wrestle our way in. So I was just like, I'm not even gonna bother. I stood in the back hallways. So the whole draft was happening, and I basically was like waiting for the moments where they were walking off the stage after being drafted to whatever team. They're walking down the hallways with their family, friends, all this stuff. So I got some kind of like cool moments. But again, it was one of those things where I'm like, do I share these because they're NFL players, or do I not share them because they're just not that good of photos? Because it's in like a dimly lit hallway, and like, who cares, right? Like, it's a weird place to find yourself.
It's like a double-edged sword. It's like a weird catch-22. It's like, do I share it because it was cool, or do I hold myself to, this isn't good enough, I could have done better?
Exactly. And I think that's where like it totally comes down to what you are trying to accomplish, right? Because if you are just trying to build an audience on Instagram, for example, where it's like, hey, like, this is a local photographer who shoots cool things, and I just want to follow along and see what they're doing. By all means, do what you want to do. I think for myself, I used Instagram as like a bit more of a portfolio for a long time, where I was like, I'm only going to share my best stuff. Now I'm kind of like, who cares? I'll just post whatever I want. I don't really have much of a strategy, which is actually quite relieving, but still fun at the same time.
Because there's no pressure of having to like, I have to get a shot from my portfolio.
Totally.
I don't share everything, but I share a good amount. Just kind of whenever I have something cool, I'm like, see how this does. I don't really care about the numbers. I'm just sharing it because I'm lucky to have a really cool job that lets me do all these things.
Totally.
Obviously, being involved in the CBL gave you an opportunity to, like you said, it gave you the access to a pro team and a pro opportunity and a pro venue. I think everyone, when they start off in this creative journey, you want to shoot the NBAs of the world. You want to shoot the NFLs, the NHLs, the MLBs. You want to make it to the big leagues. But obviously, it's not that easy. It's incredibly difficult to shoot at that level. It's incredibly difficult to get access or to be hired at that level. Having gone through that experience of working with a pro team that isn't one of the big four, what advice would you give to people who are trying to get to that level but might not have that access? What did that experience teach you in terms of shooting a pro level team without it being a big four league?
That's a great question.
Because I think this applies to people who could shoot NCAA Division I or WNBA or, non-traditional big four leagues. You know what I mean?
Totally.
What did you take out of the experience that other people could learn in terms of finding those opportunities in pro sports without having to think they have to shoot the NFL, the CFLs, etc.?
Yeah. And I mean, this is kind of like a twofold answer, because I think with the access that I had to some of the pro sports, like through Donovan, he gave me the opportunity to basically like scratch that itch where it's like, I got to shoot Leafs Game 7. I got to shoot the Blue Jays home opener after COVID. Like crazy. These moments are like wild. The FIFA qualifying match where Canada qualified for the World Cup. Like these are historic moments that I was able to be a part of, which I'm like eternally grateful for. But in shooting those moments and working full time for the CEBL, which is like a smaller league, I realized that like you need to shoot for joy. Like, where are you finding joy and like really loving what you're doing? Because ultimately that's going to carry you through. Because if you are grinding your tail off trying to get to one of the big leagues, but you're not having fun along the way, it's not worth it. It's not worth it at all. Like I had mentioned earlier that, my girlfriend Tori and I were, celebrating 2 years. We also broke up 3 times because I work too much. Right. And it's something where like for a long time I was like, her and I were talking about this morning. Like I was like, we had conversations while I was working my tail off. Like I was like every part of like I woke up and I was thinking about it. I went to bed, I was thinking about it. I was like, how can I become a better sports content creator? How can I make it to the big leagues? How can I do all this stuff? Reality is though, there is so many other parts of your life that are so important. And again, this is where it's like, where are you 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now? Because everything that's in your life, you need to be able to prioritize everything. I also recognize that I worked my ass off to get to where I am now. So there's like, there's give and take. It's kind of, everybody's process is different. Right. And so I got to respect it all. But coming back to your question, I think getting the access to, semi-pros or pros and just really loving what you're doing, like that's the most important part. It doesn't matter who you're shooting for, because ultimately at the end of the day, in 10 years from now, like you want to make sure that you're making money, you're still enjoying what you're doing, all of that kind of stuff. That might not happen if your eyes are only set on shooting the biggest teams in the league. Being in like the Toronto area, there are like 5 pro teams in Southern Ontario. And so there are also hundreds of creators that are vying for these positions, right? So I could be in there where it's like I'm working my ass off every day trying to get that one spot to sit.
It's a lot of fish in a small pond.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, you know what? Shoot those games if you get the opportunity. It's going to be wild. It's amazing. Like those are core memories that I have. You're going to relish that. But at the end of the day, those aren't what's, I'm not making a lot of money shooting those events. Like what's more important is finding the sustainability in like finding a league that you really enjoy working for, whether it's like a certain team, whether it's like, individual players and athletes, whatever it is, like that's more important than shooting for those bucket list moments. So again, it's just one of those things where it's like, you got to find that balance of prioritizing sustainability while also enjoying those like big, like historic moments that you potentially get to shoot for.
I think that really brings into perspective the realities of working in sports, whether it's full-time, whether it's freelance. And I really relate to what you said because like, in what I'm doing right now with the NHL, I just got to go to the Winter Classic. I got to go to the Stanley Cup Final. I got to go to the draft. I'm going to be at the All-Star in a few weeks, which is super, super cool. But there's the actual other side of my job. That's just my monitor. There's the actual other side of my job where I am in the office here in Toronto editing on a nightly basis. And I think you put it really well. Like, you're going to get these opportunities in your career to shoot big events, to shoot big athletes. But those events only come a couple times a year if you're lucky. You really need to love what you do on the other hand of things. So like for me, I love editing for the NHL. I love making videos with that without even having to shoot it. I probably get to shoot 3 to 4 or 5 times a year these big events for them, but I love what I do otherwise. So I think that's a really good way of putting it. It's like you really need to love what you do if you really want to get to where you want to be at that goal. Also, I always stress this, and I'm sure you'll agree, you need to focus on the journey and not the destination. As cliche as that is, like on my laptop and like on my phone and on my wall in my room, I have this saying that says, strive for progress, not perfection. And the way this applies to that, like perfection, you could put in place of like, shooting these things. Progress is the journey, the process of actually getting there. And I stress this a lot to like the younger creators. I'm like, enjoy these moments when you're shooting for your high school teams, when you're shooting for your university teams, because that level of access you're never going to get again. That level of connection with that level of connection with the athletes, you're probably never going to get again. And when you get to the higher level, you're like, oh, I miss this. So I think it's a really cool way of putting it. Like the journey is so much more important than the destination, because when you get to the destination, you're gonna be like, fuck, I liked what I was doing 2 years ago a lot more. As cool as this is, like, that was way more fulfilling.
Totally. Well, one example I have is, working for the Nighthawks this past year, we hit playoffs, and right before playoffs, I was like, we should run another media day. We need some new, fresh assets. So, within, like, it was very easy to just be like, oh, can we get a half hour with the guys? Like, film some stuff. Christian Bender came out, phenomenal photographer. He came out, we created some amazing assets leading into our playoff run, which didn't last very long, but was still fun to kind of do. But the point I'm trying to make is, we were able to run a media day last minute for 30 minutes, just like after practice. And try doing that with like the Toronto Raptors.
There's no way, because the players have other things to do. The players are being paid millions of dollars, and the responsibility, you can't just do that. Versus, like, same thing with the Ryerson girls last year. Like, my last year shooting them, it's the middle of the season, like right after the Christmas break, and I said to the coach, okay, let's shoot this video. I have this idea, let's do it. And we did it.
So cool.
And I pulled I pulled the entire team and did this video. We're gonna do like a similar photo shoot. By the time this comes out, you'll probably see it, just a photo shoot for New Jerseys. You don't get to do that at the pro level. I can't just tell Austin Matthews or Scotty Barnes, hey, we need you for a team shoot, because it doesn't work. So you need to enjoy those opportunities with that access you have. I think maybe when you're with a team versus a league or a broadcaster, it's a little different because you have that access. But, like, generally, as the higher up the rings you go, the harder it is to do the things you really want to do, and you have to accomplish you have to fulfill other needs that aren't necessarily things you want to do, but things the organization needs to do.
Totally. Well, and again, it's one of those things, like, I was out driving yesterday and I saw an advertisement for a local sports videographer or a sports photographer that works with, like, kids. And I was like, oh, I would never want to do that. But then I was thinking about it. I'm like, they probably make so much more money than I do because they've got parents that are paying, $80 for photos of their, 7-year-old playing soccer. And I'm like, I'm thinking about it. Again, it's one of those things, like, you talk about sustainability, like, freelancing, I've got friends that shoot for the Canadian Press, for other, like, wire services, doing photography for pro sports, and they make pennies compared to what you could make shooting little kids playing soccer. And so at the end of the day, like, you have to kind of figure out what everything is going to mean for you, because this has to be a sustainable career path. Like, if you're putting all of your eggs into this basket, you need to recognize that you need to be making money to actually make this a viable, proper thing, right? And this is why there's probably not a lot of full-time freelancers in the sports content industry, because there are a lot of people that will work a staff position with a league or with a team so that you can actually make money and get some of the access and all of this kind of stuff. But if you want to be a full-time freelancer, which is where I am right now, you need to broaden your skill set and broaden, like, your client base. So it's not just, I make, probably a quarter of what I make is actually shooting pro sports, whereas everything else comes from, other places of, whether it's amateur sports or whether it's, other, random freelance projects here and there, right?
I think the salary and making money in sports is a whole lot, like, basket that we could get into, and I would love to, but there are other things I want to talk about. But I think that's a really good point. And I mean, you're very much on the opposite side of where I was last year. But when I was full-time freelancing, and I use that word lightly because it was very weird. I was in a very weird scenario last year and the year before, but, like, the majority of the money back then for me also primarily came from what I was doing outside of sports, because, like, sports at times doesn't pay well, versus now being staff at the NHL, like, I have to, that brings the majority of my income coming in. So I have to say no to a lot of those other opportunities. So I think there's a lot of sacrifice that comes in working in this industry. And in my last episode with Alyssa Morrison, like I was just talking about, a very different kind of sacrifice for her, because she's a university student, had to move away from home, came to Canada, now in Florida. She's from, like, Washington. So there's different kinds of sacrifices. And I originally wasn't going to ask this, but you brought this topic up and I want to touch on it really quickly. And that's just the reality of working in sports, but not just, like, working in sports, but what it, like you said to yourself, like, you need to realize that there are other things in life other than what you do. And, you mentioned the relationship with your girlfriend, and we talked about before, living with your family now and whatnot, like, life. What is, working in sports, what does that look like to you now? But, like, sorry, I'm trying to phrase my question properly, but, like, what's life actually like working in sports? And you mentioned, you work your tail off, and I was the same. Like, I worked, and I still do, but like when I was getting into this, and I was like working 3 jobs at like I was the shooter at Ryerson, I was working at like TSN, MLSE, and I was a full-time student, and like that wore on me, that wore on my friendships, my relationships with people, my family time. What is a little bit of that reality of working in sports and being a full-time freelancer? Because it's not, it is, when people say it's a grind, like they're not kidding.
No.
So can you give us a little bit of insight there?
I'll try not to get too dark on you. No, like that's the thing is like there are some incredible highs and there are some incredible lows. And that's the reality of it, right? Like something I was saying before we, started recording was my month of November was swamped. Like it was like I traveled to New York. This was crazy. Again, this is one of those things. I was swamped, but I would do it all over again in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I flew to Brooklyn, and Donovan and I did a project covering the breakdancing world championships with Red Bull. Crazy shoot. Wild. Loved it. Came back, had like 1 day off, then flew to Regina to shoot the Grey Cup. Again, one of those things, I would do it again in a heartbeat, but I was there for a week. Came back, went on like this multi-day project, doing a bunch of like behind the scenes kind of stuff for Woodbine Entertainment. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, I was so busy, but I would do it all over again. But December, I worked like 3 days. Like January, I mean, the reason that I'm able to just kind of show up here is because I don't have anything booked until next Saturday, like a week from today, right? So like scheduling wise, I mean, we've talked about routine. Routine is like way out of whack. Some days, like some months you were so busy. There are seasons where you were so busy. The problem of working in sports is, the athletes that you're shooting, they have seasons and on like they're in season or they're out of season. When they're out of season, if you're a freelancer, you need to go find somebody else that's in season to keep shooting for them, which means you are in season. You are shooting like 5, 6, 7 days a week plus everything else going on in your life for the entire year because you were constantly moving to different teams and different leagues and all this kind of stuff. So scheduling is a nightmare. I've lost a lot of friends over the last couple of years, which is like really tough to say. I mean, I need to go to my way and make sure that everybody in my life feels loved, like feels like I still see them, I recognize them, that they're a valuable part of my life. And I've let go of a lot of people in my life because I've been so focused on sports and so focused on content. And I don't want to recommend that to anybody because again, this is one of those, conversations coming back to sustainability. Like, where are you going to be in 5 years? Are you going to be by yourself creating videos? Like, maybe that's what you want. I'm pretty introverted, so sometimes I think that's what I want. But like reality is there are other parts of your life that you can't just keep letting go because at some point you are going to run out. Whether that's, your money, your relationships, your mental health, your love life.
Physical mental energy to do this thing.
So many different aspects of your life that you need to take care of if you're going to keep this career going. Yeah.
And I think it goes back to what I said in the last episode with Alyssa. It was like, you have to make sacrifices. Okay, there's this whole thing on Twitter, and I'm not going to get into it, but it kind of relates to what I'm saying. I don't know if you saw there's someone posted a sweater that said creatives are the new athletes. You saw that? So I saw it, and I'm like, I kind of agree with it. I kind of don't agree with it. The only reason I agree with it, I think the lifestyle is very similar. Not like I'm not going to the gym and training and pre-game workouts, but like very similar to an athlete, having to make sacrifices, moving away from home, not seeing their family, having to put everything into their craft. I think creatives are very similar. And I think the sacrifice that we have to make, I relate to you. I've lost a lot of people in the last few years, but I've also found a lot more people who are now in my life who understand it more. Yeah. And I also, this is nothing against the people who left my life or your life, but like I also think the people who really support you and really get it will be there through you through thick and thick because they see it. Like, you know what I mean? Like there was a time like when I was in university with my like 2 closest friends and I wouldn't see them for a long time, and we had a few tiffs over it. But we had those conversations, we understand. But like the time that you have to sacrifice to do this is something that not a lot of people talk about. I think it's very much the deception of social media. You see the highlights and you see the cool stuff, but you don't see the nights where we're probably having a mental breakdown in front of our computer because we have an edit due in 5 hours. And you're like in a fight with your girlfriend, or like your parents are saying you're not coming over, you're not coming over enough, or like your buddies are like, oh, we're having beers, why aren't you coming out? There's so much added things that you don't see behind the scenes when you're in this field.
Well, and it's just like every other art form, like, or every other creative and artist. it's such a, like, it's all encompassing, like it's consuming, right? Like I will be, you know, in bed and it's like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night or whatever. Like I've been in bed for an hour and I will like roll over, grab my laptop, open it up and start like writing out ideas. Cause I'm like, that's when it's coming to me. And so it's just one of those things where like the reality is this is going to take up all my time. Like, you know, I took the train in today and the whole time I'm like typing up like a script for a YouTube video. And I'm like, I never turn it off. Right. And I don't want to turn it off.
But when it comes to that, getting back really quickly before we move on, that sacrifice, what's one piece of advice you would give to people just starting off or are just getting really into this feature? Like what's one piece of advice you would give them in terms of like the sacrifice they're going to have to make and a way they can get through that, like through the ups and the downs?
Yeah, I'd say, so if I'm talking to somebody that's just getting into this, I would say, give it your all. Like, don't be afraid to give it your all, because the more you can give it, the more, like, whether it's time, you know, investing, like even financially, like this is something we haven't really talked about, but I've spent a lot of money on, you know, different pieces of gear that's going to actually help me, you know, create my content, whatever. So don't be afraid of investing into this craft, recognizing that you are going to have to, like, you know, shave off some other parts of your life, right? Your free time is going to it's going to disappear. You know, some of your friends, your relationships, like things are going to be strained. And so, you know, focus, invest in this craft, but also make sure that everybody else feels loved in your life. Like that's something I think I just want to keep coming back to. And, you know, one of my goals for this year is I don't want to keep losing people because I'm so focused on my work. So how can I continue to be focused on my work while making sure that everybody else in my life feels like I still know who they are and respect them and want to be with them?
Beautiful. All right. So this part of the podcast, I'm going to go through a few questions I asked on my Instagram story for you guys to send to me and Colin questions about working in sports professionally. So we're going to go through them and answer a few of them. The first one is Shot by Sin. I probably botched that name, so I apologize. And he asked, how did you get your foot in the door to work with the NHL? Steps needed. Obviously, I'm the only one that works in the NHL here. But I don't mean that in the bad way.
I don't work with big clients.
But so we're going to change the concept of the question is, how do you get your foot in the door to work with any professional team or league, and kind of the steps you can take to do it, just to apply to both of us. So do you want to go ahead and first and like give me like the three most important things? Because we could do steps like but like, you know, how would you, starting from nothing, what are the steps you would take to get to working with a professional league?
Yeah, I don't know if there's like three exact steps. Like it's again, it's so hard to like carve this all out into like, you know,
it's not like a recipe book. You can't really, it's so different for everyone. And sorry to cut you off, but you know, in my experience overall, not just with the NHL, there was no specific path carved out in order to getting the roles, whether it was me now or with MLSC or TSN or with the Argos. It just came through knowing the right people and having the right work at the right time. Like there really is no, you know, set path to point A to point B. It's really just a very unique journey for everyone who does it in their own way.
Yeah. And I think like, you know, you have to, so like step one, I guess, is practice and be good at what you do. Like,
just start doing it.
You're never going to get to the NHL if you can't make good hockey videos, right? So again, if you know, if the NHL is your goal, go shoot every hockey team you possibly can. If your goal is the NFL, don't shoot hockey games, go shoot football games, right? So like if there's a specific sport or league or team that you want to work for, you need to like, you know, start putting the ball in that direction. So I think like being good at what you do first and foremost, that's it. Second, you have to know the right people. It's the connections that are going to bring you in, right? You are like, it doesn't matter how good you are. If nobody knows your name, if you are a nobody, whatever, like you're never going to get the job again. Right. So it's being good at what you do, knowing the right people.
And I think your path to working and where you are now speaks a lot on this. Like you, obviously you put the work in when you were at Redeemer, you put the work in when you were at McMaster. Same with me. I put the work in when I was at Ryerson, and you just made the right connections at the right time. You met Peter. He got you into the CBL. I don't know your relationship with Donovan, but obviously your connections getting him to you and then him putting you in the position to shoot the World Cup qualifier and to shoot, you know, NHL, like that Leafs game and everything. Like he put you in that position because you were able to form those connections, and eventually when the opportunity arose, you took it and ran with it.
Totally. And yeah, I'd say like the most important piece of advice that I could ever give anybody is like, be a good person.
Be a good person.
Like, honestly, if nobody wants to work with you because, you know, you're just not that enjoyable to work with, then you're never going to keep working with them, right? Like, I can't remember who said this, but, you know, my goal on set or on every production or whatever is like, I want to be good at what I do. But then also I want to be a fun person to be around. I want to be easy to be around. I want to be that person that somebody's like, hey, the shoot's done. Let's go for a beer after, right? Like, you're going to constantly work with people that you like to be with. And so if you're a good person.
Sounds like you've been hanging out a lot with Taylor Iannarelli there with the beer. Sounds like he's a...
I don't drink beers.
Oh, you don't drink beer? Okay. But yeah, I 100% agree. I think, yeah, getting the work under your belt, creating the content you want to be hired for, being a good person, having that network, and
then right timing.
And then it's right timing. Like, honestly, like for my situation specifically, like for full transparency, went through 2 job rejections, and the NHL opportunity came to my attention. And I was just, you know, it's kind of, again, like an athlete. You train all your life for this one moment, this one opportunity. I feel like I'm quoting an Eminem song, but you no, I'm not dropping bars on this episode. Maybe in the future, but like, and when the opportunity comes up, like it's one thing to ask someone how you got there, but like really, it's just waiting for the right moment. Like, jobs just come up.
Yep.
And then you apply, and then from there it's like any other job.
Yeah, even if you're really good at what you do and you know the right people, like if they're not hiring, they're not hiring.
Yeah, it's like people ask me, do you know what opportunities there are, or how to get it? I'm like, when it comes up, just apply.
Yeah.
I think it does kind of just add to that whole, there are no steps. There is no formula to this stuff. You know what I mean? You just happen upon it. Yeah. So I think those are pretty good steps. I don't know if you have anything else to add there. No. Peter Sorellis, friend of the show, friend of both of us. How did you both get so hot?
My skincare routine is off
What's your
charts.
skincare routine?
Occasionally, my girlfriend will be like, your skin is dry. Let me oil it or something. I don't actually really know what she does.
You know what, Peter? I'm going to throw this back at you. How did you get such a good beard? Please just, when you watch this, leave it in the comments below. Let me know your beard care technique.
Yeah, your beard is terrible.
Jesus Christ. Are you talking to me or talking to him?
Well, we had, for reference, 2.5 beards was this joke that I can't grow a beard.
That's our group chat name. Yeah. No, Peter, thank you for the thrilling question. Thank you for thinking we're both hot. Joey N. asks, if you were forced to only shoot one sport forever, which one would you pick? That's a really good question. I know my answer.
What's your answer?
Water polo.
Really?
No, I'm kidding. Probably. Oh, this is really tough because, like, I mean, do you have an answer before I go?
So I've got 2. If I could only pick one, I'm not really sure, but here are my 2 things. Basketball is awesome to shoot.
Yes, it's probably the most fun.
The proximity, like, you just can't beat it. Right?
Yeah. There's no barrier. Like, if I say hockey, I love hockey, but there's the boards.
The boards, the glass, it's really frustrating to get around. Whatever.
Yes.
Basketball, there's so much room and freedom to kind of, like, you can get down on the sideline or the baseline, or you can be running around, whatever. Basketball is awesome to shoot. You can basically cover an entire game with a 70 to 200 and you're chilling. You're close up with these players. These players are also like
energetic vibes.
Yeah, energetic. There's like aggression. There's so many different parts to it. Also, I think basketball is kind of cool because it has like the whole fashion piece to it as well. So there's so many different facets to it. So I love shooting basketball, but what I love shooting also is football because it's outdoor, and it's crazy how much the changing of an environment can totally change what your stuff looks like. And so it's just always exciting, right? Like, I remember there's one game I shot a Ticats game and it was snowing and the footage looks so good because like all of the snow coming down, I'm like, put it in 120. It was great. Life was good. So yeah, just like the changing environment's like really fun. So I don't know, football or basketball, I guess.
Sorry, I'm just going to write down your 2. Give me
I'm getting way too excited now.
That's fine. No, it's just I'm just not. I wasn't really preparing for it. I saw some like no, it's fine. It's fine. We'll be fine. I think for me, it would also be football purely because, and I've said this before, but like football has something that not a lot of other sports have, and it's just this sense of drama and theatrical. Like, it's like theater. It's so. I don't know. There's just something about like the way the intros and it's just a show.
It's big.
It's
right?
big. It's big stage. It's big lights. I love basketball. I love hockey. I love those two sports because those are the ones I grew up like. When I say grew up, like started shooting at the start of my career. That was what I built my foundation on. But shooting football and like the theater behind it and the stories and the aggression, the hits, like some of my favorite shots ever were with the Argos and will always be. I shot a snow game as well. I get that. The weather, shooting outdoors, seeing people just hit each other and the touchdowns, the celebrations are like not like football. I think football for me. If I had to pick one football, if I had to pick two, I'd probably pick hockey. I think just the speed of the sport. It's just a sport. I don't know how much you shot of it, but it's such a fast paced sport. And when you get that in slow motion, it's so cool to see the mechanics. It's so cool to see, and like it's just such a unique sport. I think basketball, unfortunately, would be third on my list for sure. What's one sport you want to shoot that you haven't shot yet or haven't shot a lot of?
Pro soccer.
Okay.
Pro soccer.
I haven't shot a lot of it. I shot a few games.
Yeah, I've shot, a number of kind of.
You shot a World Cup qualifier.
Yeah, I shot a World Cup
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. But I think, a barrier to soccer, similar barrier to football, but for some reason football is easier because of like the stoppage of play, so you can reposition yourself. But soccer is just like, it's this huge field. You have to have something longer than a 70 to 200, which I just don't really have. So it's like, it's a tough sport to shoot, but I really like the way that the game kind of like builds and plays, right? And there's like, it's kind of, it's a cool sport.
I would give anything to have been at the World Cup final this year. Yeah. I would have given anything to shoot that game. That would have been, that's like a bucket list item for me. My friend Niru, who I think we talked about, did we? My friend in F1? I don't know if that was you I talked to you about. Probably not.
No.
Okay.
I've watched the episode, though.
Okay. So Niru, who was on a previous episode of the Sports Creative Showcase, one of my good buddies, asked us, how do you stay multidimensional in sports when everyone around you seems to be so specialized? That's a really good question.
Ooh. See, that's an interesting question for me right now because I think I'm trying to specialize. Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of like on the brink of like, trying to figure out where I want to go with my career. But honestly, practice, right? Like, if you want to be a designer, you got to be designing every day. If you want to be doing a photo or video or whatever it is, like you have to be constantly improving each of these crafts. Because if you think about it, like, you could spend 40 hours a week doing videography and, just the hours and the time that you put into it, you're going to become a better videographer. But if you're also trying to be a good photographer, social content photographer or whatever it is, and also a designer and also all of these other things, you just got to continue to practice and do it all, I guess.
I think one thing I would add here, saying multidimensional, you have to be afraid. You have to be open to experiences that are pretty scary. Like trying something new and being it's really hard and really scary. Like to put yourself, like you have to go into something understanding you're probably not going to be good at it at first. When I started designing, I was in the backyard of my parents' house, like in the backyard, and I said, I want to start doing this because I know I have to be more than a one-trick pony. And it was scary as hell because I hated Photoshop. I didn't know anything about design. I could barely cut out a player to save my life. And I just started doing it. So it kind of intertwines with it, but like you kind of have to get over that fear and you have to be open to being in a new scary experience of trying something new. And you have to be open to the idea of like, I'm not going to be good at this at first, but as you get over that fear, you're going to embrace it more. So I think, like what Colin said is just practice, but also being open to trying new things and experimenting and opening yourself up to those new skills that you may not have before and openly accept the fact that you may not be good at it to start.
And I also think you have to be really interested in all of the different facets because you can't just throw yourself into one, style of content or whatever and not actually enjoy it because you're going to burn out so quickly.
Yeah, exactly. 11th Man Productions is asking us, how do you land jobs at higher levels? It's hard to get to film, college, and pro games. I think we kind of touched about that a little bit, but I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I think like it's
connections.
You got to play the long game, right? Like if you want to do this next week, like it's probably not going to happen, right? I don't know. Yeah, that was a stupid answer.
No, I don't think it's no, it's true. No, it's like, I think, no, you know what? And I'm going to keep that because you're right. I think, a lot of people, when they come into this industry and start doing it, they see people at these upper levels and they want to do it right away. But I think a really important thing to understand is like this takes time. This is not something that happens overnight. Getting to the NFL as a football player takes an entire lifetime. You work at it since the day you put on the football pads and the cleats and you go out there. The same thing goes to a very micro scale of being a creator and working in this industry. Like, you could start tomorrow and it's going to take you a while to get to where you want to be. Like, I've been doing this for almost 4 or 5 years now. And only last year was I able to shoot my first couple of professional sports games with the CFL and the NHL. Like, this takes time. So I don't know if 11th Man Productions has been doing this for a while, if you've only been in it for a year. The biggest thing I can say is, like, literally just be patient with it. The time and the opportunities will come your way if you're working hard, if you're opening yourself to meeting new people. Again, it goes back to the connections. It goes back to building the portfolio. But I think the biggest thing that I have to preach is patience. Mm-hmm. Like you said, this isn't going to happen next week. It's going to happen when the time is right and when you've been in the game long enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I shot Canadian college sports, which is a little bit lower than American college sports. So I shot OCAA content for, 4 or 5 years before I really got to actually start shooting professional sports. And so, yeah, it's a long game. You just got to kind of wait it out.
I shot Ryerson Athletics for 3-4 years. Still shot it last year when I was working at the professional level of sports. And I really didn't get that break until last year. So it's truly like Rome wasn't built overnight. This is going to come when the time is absolutely right.
Yep. Has a nice ring to it.
D Jacobs 11 asks, any advice on getting connected with teams or players? Don't be afraid to send cold emails or a cold DM.
Yeah.
I don't know I have a few points, but like,
that's all I've done is just shots in the dark, right? Like, send those emails. The amount of times I've gone through staff directories on like a team's website,
LinkedIn.
I'm just finding like who are the content producers, who are like anybody that has to do anything with like media or marketing or whatever. Those are the names I'm going to continue to reach out. And yeah, like honestly,
I think a really important part about that is when you make the connection, you have to I could email you in the future, your content director, I could email you and I could be like, hey, my name's Juan. I do this. I would love to work with you guys. There's that. And then there's the other way of doing, which is the right way, and saying, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is the value I want to offer you. Totally. So I think one thing a lot of people miss when it comes to this side of work is like, they think we're saying it's very simple. Email people, DM people, LinkedIn, yes, but you need to offer a value proposition. You need to either show them or tell them what you can do, because that's a really important thing. I'm certain that people who work at, creative director roles, marketing director roles, they probably get so many emails and DMs from young people who want to work in this industry and want to get involved. And so the way to stand out is giving them that value and that offer proposition, right? So I think that's a really big way of separating yourself from the pack in terms of, don't be afraid of sending those emails out, those DMs too. I don't know if I've ever told you, and I'm not going to say who it is, but one of my goals in 2021 was to work with a pro athlete on their brand. And I did get to do it. I didn't post about it. I did a little bit, but I'd never outly said I worked with this guy. But the way I did it was I literally just shot him a DM. A straight cold DM on Instagram. He's verified. I never thought he would see it. I just shot him a DM and said, hey man, this is who I am. I've followed your career for XYZ years. We have this in common. If you're smart enough and you're listening to this, you can probably clue 2 and 2 together as to who this is. And then I basically said, this is what I do, and I would love to work with you on your brand. If you need anything, photos, video, like, hit me up. And it took me I sent that message, and then maybe 3 weeks later, it's like 6 a.m. or some ungodly hour. I wake up and I look at my phone, and I didn't even hear a notification, but I just see the message. And I put my phone down, and I'll get back to it in the morning. And I wake up again because I'm like, no way. And then I open Instagram, there's a blue check mark, and he replied. He saw my message. But I offer the value. So I think even with DMs, like, offer a value. Even if you wanted to, like, I don't know if you get a lot of people hitting you up to work with you, but I get people asking me if you ever need help, da-da-da-da. The ones that stand out to me are saying, this is what I want to offer you, or this is the value. I want to shoot BTS for you. I want to do this. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, I would just say, like, don't hesitate to offer like a free trial, basically, right? Like, the amount of times that I've ended up buying like a music licensing subscription or whatever because I did the 30 days and then I was like, oh, I actually kind of like this. And then I bought in and I paid for it. The first Ticats game I ever shot, I think was for free. Like I remember, again, sending an email to the marketing director of the Ticats at the time. And I was just like, hey, I would love to do this. Let me shoot it for free. If you like what you see, let's talk about it. So they had me out. I shot one game. They were like, oh, this is great stuff. Let's do it again. And so you can just continue to kind of work off that. The amount of like free jobs that have led to paid work, it's unbelievable.
Amazing. Ray Bro, how would you say this? Raybo 2C? I don't know. I'll put the name here. Again, I apologize if I can't read your handle right. He asks, burnouts, how do you deal with them?
I don't deal well with them.
I don't think anyone does.
That's probably why it's a burnout. I mean,
I think being aware of when you're burning out is a really, like, it's a hard thing to do, but like just having that self-awareness of understanding, like, I'm overworked, overtired, like it's going to hit you like a bus. You're not going to really see it. But I think like dealing with them is, I think for me, when I'm burnt out, I distance myself as much as I can from my work, at least for a day or a few hours. I get up, get out of my room, go for a walk, get some fresh air. It's very basic stuff, it sounds like, but like, trust me, like there's nothing that helps me more when I'm like deep in an edit and I feel myself burning out is like going for a walk, getting a coffee, like maybe going hanging out with like my friends or my roommate, or just like doing something different for a few hours and coming back to it. If you're really severely burning out, like just take time off.
Something that we don't talk about enough is like longer term burnouts, you know? And so like, especially as a freelancer, you know, we kind of mentioned this earlier, like, you know, if you work for a team, you've got, you know, you're in season, you're playing games, whatever, and then you're off season where you can kind of rest, you know, you take a step back or whatever. As a freelancer, I'm always jumping from season to season. But what I'm realizing is it's so important to build out times of off season for yourself so that you can rest and so that you can kind of like come back to it. Right. And that's not, you know, more than just kind of like, you know, grabbing a coffee, kind of taking a break for like a day or 2 days or a weekend or a week or whatever. But it's also like, what if you commit to like, I'm not going to create any sports content for 2 months. I'm going to see what happens, because when I come back to it, I'm going to have so many other like fresh ideas that you've built upon from like all of these other different places and experiences that you've had in those 2 months.
That's a really good answer. And I think like it also, you're freelance, I'm full time. There's a really big discrepancy, but like, I know when the off season comes for me, like I'm going to want to take a vacation because it's a slog. It's an absolute grind working an entire year. But versus freelancing, you're kind of able to take that time a little more. But like in general, I think like just make sure you're taking time for yourself. Make sure and whether that's literally something I like doing is most Sundays, typically, minus today when my parents decided to drop in on me and I knew I had a podcast with this guy. Most Sundays when I'm not working, I will not set an alarm clock and I will let my body wake me up. And just taking that time to recover. And it does wonders for like the rest of my week. Do you know what I mean? So I think small things and small life changes like that can really make a big difference. Any other tips? No? I think it's Dalton with an X. Dalton.w asks, tips on quick gimbal to handheld switch with only one camera. So I'm like, are you a gimbal guy? I'm not a gimbal guy.
You know what? I
hate gimbals.
I've loved a gimbal for like pre-game. That's the
only time.
Oh, it's so nice. Like, you know, shooting the Grey Cup and having the gimbal out with like the 35mm lens, f1.4, filming wide open. Like those shots are just so buttery, so nice. Truthfully, I don't have a good system for it.
Neither do I.
I've got two cameras.
My whole thing with gimbals is like, I mean, it's funny. I was
and you bought one.
I bought one. So, cause my other one was broken. And I made a video on YouTube. If you want to check it out, I hate gimbals. I just don't think they're very feasible. I think they're very it's a clusterfuck to use one sometimes. Like you have to balance and you have to go. So I respect people who are really good with them. I'm okay with them. But even like last year at the Stanley Cup final, like when they were lifting the trophy, I was handheld the whole time. I wasn't, because I was shooting a Thai Cats game once, an Argos Cats game. It was like a very important game of the season. And they're coming out for the walkout, the Argos, and then it's like they're coming out and the game was like beep, 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 pff. So ever since then I've been scarred, although I will admit they have a time and place. The tip I would give is kind of what he said. So my routine when I was just at the Winter Classic was I ended up using the gimbal for scenics, pregame stuff. You know, when they were coming onto the ice, warm up, stuff like that. I would get that with the gimbal. And then as they're stepping onto the ice, I would step out, take it off, put my handles on it, really quickly rig it up and stick to that the whole game. I would not recommend switching between them in game. Don't do that because it's like, you're wasting time. You're not going to balance it properly. It's going to fail on you. And also, I just don't really think shooting sports with a gimbal looks really good. If you do it and it works, and I know some people who shoot practices with it, whatever, that's great. But I just don't trust enough in that system to get the shots I want to get with my hands, right? So this is a question that we've kind of basically have been talking the entire episode about from Michael Izinga. Compare and contrast freelancing versus working for a team/company. I mean, we've been talking about it a little bit. But I think the biggest difference, you give me the biggest pro and give me the biggest con for working freelance. And I'll give you the biggest pro and I'll give you the biggest con for working with a league full time.
Time management.
Is that the pro and the con?
It's one of those things. Like like as a freelancer, I have time off and I can take time off whenever I want to, whenever I need to. Also at the same time though, like when it rains, it pours. Like I've had it where it's like,
oh, I love that saying.
I won't have work for like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe like the odd, little job or whatever. And then all of a sudden I'll get like 4 weeks back to back work every single day. And you just have to do it because you got to take it when it comes. Right. So time management's kind of one of those like pros and cons of freelancing versus being on staff somewhere.
Yeah, I think I've experienced both. So, I mean, from the full-time staff side of things, the biggest pro, obviously, I think is just consistent financial security. It's nice to get a paycheck and know that you're covered when it comes to your rent, your groceries, everything you need to cover, putting food on the table. That's obviously like one of the biggest pros. I think also another pro to attach to that is like you have consistent work, which means you're able to work on projects very much consistently, but that also comes with the con of like you're expected to be creative every single day and making something new on a very consistent basis, or else you're not doing your job, which can in turn burn you out and be very mentally taxing and exhausting. So when you're looking at it, it's kind of a battle between like you're making a sacrifice in terms of you're getting consistent pay and you're getting all these consistency and routines in your life, but at the cost of like you're having to be creative so much so consistently that it can really exhaust you and burn you out. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that sense. Is like, you're doing what you love, but you might be doing a little too much and it starts to hurt you. But at the end of the day, you're able like to put food on the table and get that. But I think also one other thing with time management, it allows you to have a routine. And that's what I really like. I know every single night, as long as it's a regular season night and I'm not going anywhere, I'm going to work every evening from these hours. I have the rest of my day to do what I want, which, I like having that balance and that routine versus like freelance. Like I like having a routine. When pandemic, I didn't have a routine. I was going crazy, but that's just me, right? Like I think everyone's different.
Yeah, one more thing that is going to add as like a pro to being on staff somewhere is that you are a part of a team rather than just showing up every once in a while, right? Like as a freelancer, I might document every game for one team, but like I'm not really getting to know anybody, right? Whereas, when I was on staff with the Nighthawks, like you're around these players all the time, so you get to know who they are because you're there in practice, you're there during the games. You can build relationships with a lot of these people, which, can then lead into other things, but also you get so caught up in like the game or the season. Like I was so heartbroken when the Nighthawks like lost the playoff game, and I was like, well, I guess that's it for the season, right? Like that's a feeling that's actually a really good thing because it shows how invested you are in the story of the team that you're working for.
Me with the Argos, not this year, but the year I was with them the entire season, when they lost to the Ticats in the East Final, I was like, well, that's it.
Yeah.
And it sucks, but it is like that, you're invested. I wanted them to win. And it was, for me, it was weird watching them win and I wasn't with them and I was there for that ride the year before. But like, it is like you get invested and you get to be part of a team. You get to be part of a family, an organization.
I've got one funny story just to expand on this.
Yeah, go for it.
I shot the Grey Cup. My first Grey Cup I shot was last year. And it was the Hamilton Ticats versus the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I live in Hamilton. I'm a Ticats guy. That's been my thing. It's the Grey Cup. It's in Hamilton. Like, this was like it was a movie. Like we were like, this is gonna be crazy.
It's the Canadian Super Bowl,
and the Ticats lost the game. But I was working for the CFL, so the game finishes, and it was a crazy game. Not gonna get into it on what I think should have happened or whatever, but crazy game. Game finishes. I sit there. I had like 1 second where I was like, oh, my team lost, and then I was like, shoot, I work for the league, so I gotta get out there and like capture the game. And so I spent the next like 3 hours with the Blue Bombers after they beat the Ticats in Hamilton, and it was the worst and best experience of my life. Like running around for the first time, like you're on the field and everybody's got like these
the trophies,
these raging confetti, emotions. Yeah. It was amazing, but I was like, but it's not the team I wish it was. So
I have a very similar story. The pandemic season where the NHL had a bubble. I was working with the Leafs at the time as a social media video editor for the playoffs, and they were playing Montreal in the first round. And I'm a Habs fan, but I worked for the Leafs, I think 2 years up until this point. So I've kind of garnered respect for the team and like the organization to a degree. Working there, same thing, right? but it was like a really weird experience. The Leafs were up 3-1 in the series, and I'm a Habs fan. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm working for the Leafs. Like, this means I get more work. I keep working into the playoffs. The deeper they get, the better it is for me, but also, like, for the organization. And then the Leafs choked the lead, and it's 3-3 going into Game 7. And I'm really torn because I'm like, either Toronto moves on and it's cool because they finally get rid of the demon. I keep getting to work and prove my skills and do more cool stuff with the NHL and see how far with the Leafs and see how far they can go. Or I can see my favorite team ever take down the team that I absolutely despised in my childhood. And what ended up happening, Toronto lost that series against Montreal. And I literally remember sitting there and I was like, I didn't know how to feel. I was literally sitting there like, I don't know how to feel because I don't have any more work for the rest of my season's done. I'm not making any more money. But the Canadians just like did the impossible and they came back from a really crazy deficit. And I didn't know how to feel. Montreal ended up going to the Stanley Cup final, so I didn't give a shit by the end of it. But it was like such a weird, like, complex feeling. I'm like, I should be mad and I'm happy, but I'm not happy. But you know what I mean? Very, very similar experience. One last question before we get into like the last part of the podcast. And this is a question I had because through this conversation, I realized how many crazy experiences you've had. And I'm very jealous of a lot of you got to go to a Grey Cup before me. And I at the time was so happy for you, but I'm like, fuck, I wish I could be there. So you've gotten to go to like that, the World Cup qualifier. You've shot a Leafs game. You've done a lot of have you done Raptors?
It's the last one on my bucket list.
Okay. I'll trade you my one Raptors game for your one Leafs
Done.
game.
Let's do it.
So you've gotten to shoot a lot of really cool stuff. What is the single coolest experience or thing you've like the single? I'm not gonna say the coolest thing you've shot, like the coolest event, but what is the coolest experience? Anything goes. Either a player that you shot or a moment that you captured. What is the coolest thing you've witnessed so far in your sports career? I kind of want to make this a consistent thing on the podcast. Leave a comment if you like this idea.
That's a great idea. Can
I guess what it is?
Yeah, please do.
I mean, for me, out of everything you shot, I would have to be Canada qualifying for the World Cup.
Yeah, that was cool.
It's not the one though.
It's not the one.
He's pulling out the Instagram.
Yeah, I'm just looking through my Instagram here. You know what? I think the Leafs game is probably it. So we've talked about this game. Yeah, this is probably, although, yeah, I've had the pleasure of shooting a lot of really fascinating events. And that's, this is, again, I'm going to answer this in a long way. We have such a unique role where we are capturing history. Like we are literally, okay, I'm going to talk about the Leafs game for a second. So I shot one Leafs game. This game, last season, Game 7.
Tampa, right?
Tampa, yeah. Yeah.
It was Tampa.
So I get the call. So I've been working with Donovan Bennett. He's a producer at Sportsnet. Great guy. Love the stories we work on. Shout out to you, I guess, if you're watching this, if you've made it this far into the podcast. No, but Donovan's pulled me out for, some of the most memorable shoots that I've ever had. Working for Sportsnet means it's not just one team, it's not just one league, but it's like all of these, different sports. He gave me the call up for Leafs Game 7. And I remember, I was on the train into Toronto, like just so excited because I grew up in Southern Ontario, like small town, I didn't really play hockey, but the Leafs are
the Mecca.
They're it, they're him.
That's him.
If I could say
Himothy. Himmy Johns.
Maple Hymns, Leafs. Anyways, that's terrible. So I'm on my way to shoot Leafs Game 7 against Tampa. This is like crazy. I'm so excited about this. Donovan had sent me a voiceover for the video that we were making, and there's two different options. So one of them was like, if we lose the game, this is the voiceover we're going to use. If we win the game, this is the voiceover we're going to use. And I was on the train.
That's really good production.
Yeah, it was cool. Well, we had to turn around these pieces so fast.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I just love that. I just love that they had that ready. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was wild. So I'm on the train and I've got my music licensing opening, and I'm just listening to all of these different songs while reading over the script, and I have like shivers just running. I'm like, if the Leafs get through Game 7 and I'm the one there to make the video about it, that's crazy. Like, I'm so humbled to say that, like, you know, some of these jobs, like, we're not just shooting sports and making fun, you know, pieces.
You're witnessing literal history.
We're witnessing history, and I'm going to be the guy that, like, you know, creates the video that's going to air on Sportsnet the next morning for it. Like, what an amazing kind of opportunity. So anyways, I'm on my way to the Scotiabank Arena. I get there, I'm early. I'm like an hour there before Donovan is. So I go inside and I'm trying to grab some scenic. So, you know, I grab some photos just like on my phone, throw them up on my Instagram story to be like, yo, I'm here at the Leafs game. Everybody give me some love, you know, all that kind of stuff. I grab some, like, you know, some video clips that I may or may not use in the video. And then I'm just like, okay, I've got like another half hour before Donovan gets here. What am I going to do? I'm just going to sit. So I like go and I just sit in one of the seats. And the whole space is like, it's empty. There's nothing happening in there. But all the lights are like, you know, they're like all the like the blue LEDs on, like, you know, one of Taylor's videos is probably like up on the screen, like all the lights. It's crazy. And it's this moment where it's like, it's dead quiet in there. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, this is everything I've ever wanted without knowing that I've ever wanted it, because I never thought I would be there. Like, I never once in a million years thought that I would ever be shooting a Leafs game, B,
a playoff
game where it's game 7 and they could beat, like, they could do it. And like, this is the team to do it, right? Like, we know that Toronto sports, like at this, you know, in this era, like they've got the team to kind of
eventually get over the hump.
So anyways, the game starts and I'm just like, I get, you know, the best seat in the house because I'm everywhere. Like, I'm, you know, so I start the game and I'm kind of down by the ice and I'm shooting, you know, warm-ups and the guys are coming out and whatever. And then I go up into like the, you know, the 300 level or whatever it is, like up way up. And I'm like, you know, I get this shot. It's probably one of my favorite shots ever. I think John Tavares scored this goal, but it got called off because there was like a,
pick. They were like the Justin Hall pick. Yeah.
But I got the shot and I'm sitting there watching it. Like, this is before we knew that, you know,
whatever happened, it was a pick. Yeah.
And I get this shot and I'm just like, I'm like almost in tears because of this moment. You know, there are thousands of people screaming and we're all wanting the same thing and I'm there shooting it. And it's just like such a special moment. And then they lost, which was like devastating. We still created a really cool piece out of it. I'm pretty proud of it. But yeah, that was probably one of the coolest moments that I've ever had shooting sports.
That's awesome. I think this is something I always, I've recently started taking and doing when I'm at these events. And this goes out to you and anyone, if you ever have the opportunity, like Colin just mentioned, to be at an event and you did it in your story, take a minute, put your camera down and step back and just actually look at where you're at and like take it in. Like, when I was at the Stanley Cup final and the Avalanche won the cup, they're celebrating. I'm like the second wave of people getting on the ice and I'm on the ice. They're literally hoisting the cup, like how I took that photo back. And it's nuts. And then I remember, like, it's maybe like an hour in, all the families are coming onto the ice and I literally take a second, I walk to center ice and I put my camera down and I just look. And it's the same thing. It's like I cannot believe I'm here and everything I work. Mm-hmm. So my advice to you guys, very much what you did, take a second whenever you shoot your first NFL game, whenever you shoot your first NBA game, if you ever shoot a championship game, if you ever get to accomplish a dream of yours, take a minute, put your camera down and soak it in, because it's truly like you feel so appreciative of like everything you've done finally got to that point. And I know exactly how you felt in that moment. I fucking love that. Like, that is so electric.
It's so special. And I mean, like, I've had so many of those moments, right? But like, that's why it's hard to, but I remember one of the first moments I had was like my third year of university and I went out with like the men's we've talked about this, the men's volleyball team won, like, you know, bronze medal or whatever, and the emotions and everything, but you're such a part, like, you're just a part of it. And there's no way to describe the emotions that are going on in your, like, in your head and your heart. Like,
and then you go back and watch what you shot and you're like, holy cow.
Oh, I did that. I got that.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's insane.
It's cool.
Amazing answer. So before we wrap up, one thing we want to talk about in the podcast, it was the original topic and then we just got sidetracked with everything, but I want to talk to you about your goals for the new year. By the time this comes out, hopefully I get it out in this month. It's not too far off the new year. We're in 2023. You accomplished a lot last year. Give me 3 of your biggest goals for the new year.
Yeah. So my last, 2022, I worked hard to do as much as I possibly could, get myself into as many conversations as possible, shoot every sport I possibly could, do anything. Like, and I worked so hard. And I'm very grateful because that brought me to a really cool place. But this year, I don't want to just create a lot of different things. I want to create some really meaningful, really impactful, really cool, really well done projects. I really want to take my time with it and really kind of like focus on my skills and on what I can do. So yeah, I think my first goal is to just like get better at what I do and be, every project, I want it to be the best project that I've worked on. I think another thing is I also want to create content for myself. So that's where slowly building my own YouTube channel where, I don't have a client telling me how to revise it. I can just, do whatever I want. I can just have fun with it. It's incredible how like creating content that you really like and you're really passionate about and it's for yourself. It's helpful. It's healthy, I think.
I said this, we had a kind of a goal setting call, me and a few friends the other night. And I said this to them earlier in the year. And it relates a little bit to what you were saying with the men's volleyball team that won bronze. When I shot the women's basketball team winning OUAs and Nats this last spring, I was not getting paid for that. Purely pro bono, out of pocket, because I love that team. And I told them I would give them one more year after COVID because I didn't get my last COVID year shooting sports at Ryerson. And I told them on the call the other night, and I say that like create something that feeds your soul. And that sounds so fucking cringy and cliche, but like as a creative, like fulfill what you want to do just as much as you want to fill your soul more than you want to fill your wallet. Yeah, you got to put money in the wallet and put food on the table, but like make stuff that like makes you feel good. And like I didn't make a cent from that run. I got 2 really cool hats that say national champion on it. It's cool. That's all I got. But like the feeling of being able to witness that and shoot that and create, like I've made 3 different pieces off it. I'm working on a longer documentary. Doing that, I made this piece for the ring ceremony and seeing the reactions of reliving all that was worth everything. So like, I love that. You like make stuff that fulfills your creative, like energy and a vibe, in a sense, you know what I mean? I really like that. What are your other 2 goals?
Well, I guess my last one, cause I had the, make better stuff, make stuff for yourself. And I think I'm trying to figure out how to say this, and I'm gonna keep it like career wise because we're talking about sports and content and whatever.
So it could be a personal goal.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna say relationships, kind of like as a goal, whether that's like really spending time with like family and friends outside of work, but also like you can make some incredible friends in this industry because everybody knows what you're doing and they get it, right? And so I think reaching out to and being like supportive of other creatives goes so far in terms of like, building lifelong friendships and, really working at pushing each other to be, more creative and creating better stuff. And so, yeah, just being intentional with the people that are around you, whether they're, at the workplace or not.
Yeah. Circling yourself with the people who are going to motivate you and push you. I love that. And I think I witnessed that over the last few years. Like community is really important in this. And this is why I do the YouTube channel. This is why I do the podcast, to build community of people who have the same ideals and same situations and like help each other and boost each other. Last question. This is something I ask to everyone. What is the number one piece of advice you would give to anybody who is looking to start working in the sports creative world or is already in it? What's the piece of advice you think you would tell Colin when you first started? What's like the number one piece of advice?
The number one piece of advice that I would give would probably be, enjoy the journey. I know we've talked about this, but every bucket list goal, every, dream I've ever had, I have crushed, and now I need to keep going. Right. So
nice.
The job's not done just cause I checked off some of those boxes, but it's about, enjoying the journey, enjoying the process, have fun with it. Like it's something, we have the best job in the world. Like, I mean, obviously some people can disagree with that, but enjoy every day and, don't take it for granted.
I love that. All right. We're going to wrap this episode up. Colin, thank you so much for coming on. Where can the people find you? Give yourself some plugs, social media, YouTube. You're on that grind now. Where can the people find you? What's your at? Where are you at?
Yeah, well, don't text.
Home address, credit card numbers, whatever you want to give us, man.
Say, don't text me or call me because I don't ever.
His number's 905. I'm kidding.
It's actually a 519 number, but anyways.
My bad. Hamilton boy.
No, just my name, Colin Wouda. That's how it's pronounced. Everybody messes that one up. That's fine.
I always thought it was Wouda.
Yeah, everybody does. I forget.
That's why I didn't say your last name at the start of the show. If you go back, you'll see that.
For sure. But just at Colin Wouda on Instagram. I think YouTube's
got handles now, but you should just be able to look up Colin Wouda.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Cool. And I will also put all of his links, stuff on the description. Are you on TikTok? Saw you post
Not
one.
really.
You should get on TikTok.
Yeah, It's fine.
All right.
We'll
Talk
see.
about that maybe on your channel one day.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I will put all of Colin's links in the descriptions. Go follow him. He is a bang up content creator. Awesome dude. Sir, thank you for coming on the show. If you guys are new to the show, this episode will be coming out here on YouTube first. In a week, it'll be coming out on all audio platforms. So make sure if you're listening on YouTube, give this a like, give it a subscribe. Go give him a subscribe. And we'll wrap up here and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.
Cheers.